We're back at Investor Townhouse headquarters in San Diego, California. I'm your host, Daniel Wong. On today's program, we welcome back Devin Thorpe. He's a journalist, author, educator, speaker, and contributor to Forbes. Devin, thanks so much for coming on.
It's an honor to be back. My heavens, Dan, thank you for having me.
So, Devin, last time I caught up with you, we were at the Crowd Invest Summit, and you've been very busy here. And there's obviously been a lot of talk about these ICOs and cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and you've written some very interesting articles about that. But what I wanted to do is get your take on the fact that this blockchain technology is actually going to do some really good in this world, and I'd like you to give us your opinion on how that's going to be applied and how it's really going to help people.
Well, there's no question that blockchain is going to change the world in dramatic ways, but I get especially excited about applications that solve problems for people who are in desperate, poor situations. And one of the things that got me really excited was a story I did about a company that is using the blockchain to create a portable identification for refugees. Refugees often end up in a place where they have no records. They're carrying no physical identification, no physical ID, and that ID then becomes a real handicap, or lack of identification becomes a real handicap to them in getting jobs, getting placed into a new situation that would be better. And so by using a digital blockchain-enabled identification system for the refugees, they eliminate the risk of losing all of that information, all the progress they may make when they're in, say, one refugee camp and have to move to another or other desperate situation. So as they move from, from Ethiopia to Kenya to Turkey to Germany to the United States, wherever they're passing now, that ID can follow them. And I think that's a really great example of how blockchain can really be used to help the very poorest, most at-risk people in the world. And that gets me excited. Of course, all of us are going to benefit from the blockchain. It's going to be as revolutionary as the internet.
Well, of course, Devin, you talk about that because you've always covered, crowdfunding for social good, things for, social good. You've had many books on that. So this is right up your alley as far as the many applications. And, we're going to see a lot more applications, I think, because there's so many different ways a lot of people haven't even thought of, and they're just now applying it. And I think they're ingenious, for instance, as you mentioned, helping out refugees here. So where else do you see them applying this that can really help people as well?
Well, I think, one of the use cases that has been most advocated, most implemented, is using it for transfers of money, especially in the developing world. And that is an exciting potential application. And I think there are some really neat applications for new coins in that market as well, because I think the opportunity there from my viewpoint, is in the ability to make cross-border transactions. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of the existing coins. For a lot of purposes, a new coin that is readily transferable between, say, an asset like electricity or a service, software as a service in any form, and then a local currency would be really handy. And so even new currencies or coins would really have, I think, the potential to be of tremendous value to people in making those kinds of cross-border exchanges of value. So I think that, there are a lot of use cases where people can help people who are really struggling in this world to get on to an economic ladder that would provide upward mobility.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, we were chatting earlier about, obviously blockchain is revolutionizing the way people are doing business now, something kind of similar to the internet. Kind of talk to us a little bit about that and where you feel this is now similar to that time and where people can really take advantage and grasp this, because it's not going anywhere. Blockchain will revolutionize just like the internet did. But explain a little to us about that.
Well, I think if we were to draw an analogy, I would say that we are in the blockchain world in the late 90s of the internet world, where we're seeing tremendous enthusiasm and all kinds of business models are being tested. And quite frankly, we're seeing evidence of a bubble like we saw in the late 90s with respect to the internet. We saw business models tested during the late 90s that were funded, some of them massively funded, that in fact don't function at all today, right? And the reason is they were fundamentally flawed. Others were fabulous models and are working really, really well and survived, even though they went through a price correction process. And I think we'll see the same with blockchain and a lot of new coins coming out. I think some of these coins will disappear and they'll stop trading in a few years. Other coins will always have value and always be traded. And I'm not going to make a guess as to which ones do and which ones will and which ones won't. But I will say that the closer a coin is to the creation of value, seems like that will, the more intrinsic the value appears to me, I think that's where we'll see the coins do the best.
So definitely what I'm hearing is token economics, making sure that it makes sense and there's some true value there. Now, you also just wrote an article recently about some concerns going on with fraud within the crowdfunding space and arena, which is very similar to these, initial coin offerings as well. So I'm sure the same advice and the same concerns can be, applied in both those areas. What are some of those that are going on, and how do you see that applied in both those particular, ways as far as initial coin offerings and crowdfunding campaigns?
Well, clearly, an initial coin offering is a crowdfunding campaign. It is just that it is the reward or the investment is in a new coin rather than in something else. It's not a donation. So it'll be interesting to see how things go with that. I think the concerns about fraud in crowdfunding are probably overstated, overblown, right? If a crowdfunding campaign is if it has any signs of fraud in it, those are usually captured by the crowd pretty quickly, and no funding comes, right? So it's sort of a crowd check on the funding opportunity. And I think we'll see that happen in the long run with Bitcoin. Right now, or with blockchain and ICOs, right now we are seeing a bit of froth in that market, right? We're seeing some evidence of bubble behavior, and people aren't being as skeptical as they should be, because there is a perception right now that this is a way to get really high, really quick returns. In fact, I say there's a perception. In fact, people have been making huge fortunes in recent years with investment in cryptocurrencies. And so there is a rush right now into that space. One of the corollaries to that I would want to point out, Dan, is that this is a great time to be an issuer. If you are thinking about raising money, doing it through a coin offering is really tantalizing right now because there is so much enthusiasm. But I would act quickly before the late 90s turn into the early 2000s.
Well, Devin, that's a great point you make there. But, what I wanted to talk about is, yes, there's such this rush to get in that people probably aren't doing the due diligence they should. Do you see that now catching up here fairly soon, kind of similar to what crowdfunding is, or at least those particular campaigns, just because they simply aren't educated enough and don't understand it, but they know there's a lot of money being made, so they just jump in?
Yeah. So I think what's going to happen is, because the dollars now are so big in the cryptocurrency community, that what will happen, I think, is that regulators are going to step in, and that's going to change a lot of the processes. It's going to, the traditional white paper for an ICO, and I haven't reviewed many of them. I don't want to claim to be an expert, having reviewed many thousands, right? But having reviewed some, I would say that the disclosures there don't rise to the level of clarity and completeness that would be required in an SEC filing for an IPO, for instance, or even the customary disclosures required in a private offering memorandum or a private placement memorandum. So I think what we will see is that the SEC will start to get involved and require clearer disclosures so that people can make better investment decisions. I think that's likely to come. And I think I think people will then begin to look for ICOs that are regulated, and so that they have the benefit of a little bit more security. That skepticism we see in the crowdfunding space will bleed over, and people are going to say, oh yeah, if I have a choice between investing in an ICO domiciled in an offshore business, and it's offered in the United States sort of clandestinely, and it's not regulated here, versus an offering that was vetted by the SEC, or at least complied with SEC rules, I think we'll start to see a real shift toward that approach. And then people will be able to ask much more sophisticated questions about the premise of value for the coin.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I think that's something we're going to see very soon, is that if a company's out there, I think the best advice that anyone could give them is make sure you're compliant, make sure you're one of the ones that survives once it does come in and crack down. But Devin, it looks like that's about all the time we have for today, but we'd like to thank you so much for coming on the show, Devin. We'll definitely have you back on soon.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Folks, that was Devin Thorpe. He's a journalist, author, educator, speaker, contributor to Forbes. If you want to find out more information about Devin Thorpe or talk to him about speaking engagements, go to devinthorpe.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're not going to want to miss the interviews coming up here. And follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll see you next time. Stay tuned for the next interviews here on InvestorTownHall.com.